What does it take to become an elite 40K player? How do the top competitors overcome bad dice? The Competitive 40K Network presents Art of War Unbroken. Insight into the game plans of the top players on the planet with your hosts, Blake Law and the Art of War coaches.
Hello and welcome to an episode of what I'm going to call Kill Team Unbroken. This is one of the greatest games out there. It's very underrated and I've been loving it. For those of you who don't know, I'm Blake Law. I am here to talk about the one, the only Kill Team. It's like 40K with less miniatures and it's phenomenal. I am, of course, joined by my co-host for the second time, Mr. Travis Cheng. How you doing, Travis?
Hey, man. It's good to be on. Good to be back. It's been a while.
You've been doing a lot since we last talked, man. You've been all over the place. You run, of course, your event, the New York Open up in Brooklyn. What else you been into?
We hit the World Championships recently. We were able to get Adrian, one of our locals, in to be world number one because I convinced him to go to LVO. A little bit of help from Goonhammer. So he's got the whole run up there. I think my podcast, YouTube, Just Another Kill Team podcast, we have his vlog. So if anyone is curious about what the final leg of US number one looked like, that's on the internet for anyone to watch.
And you were playing, of course, your Pathfinders. And
yeah,
what was he playing?
He was on Commandos. He started playing Commandos, I think, in February of 2023. And obviously, a slew of buffs have happened since then. That all basically helped Commandos. They finally got nerfed at the end of 2023, but not really enough to really hurt them. Losing just a little bit off the top, maybe some of their most obnoxious lines of, I'm just going to skip playing the game because I will have three people in your face at the opening of turn one and I'll just watch you make mistakes. That is gone, but the core of the team is still a ton of wounds that you have to chew through, and they all are very good in melee, which is a very good combination, turns out.
That feels like a perfect segue into what I think this episode is going to be about, which is my intro into Kill Team. And I played Commandos, and it was freaking rough. So I just want to bring it up. So I started out as Kill Team last month, actually. I've been talking about it for a year, and I finally got into it. I went to an event called Triangle Open over in Durham, North Carolina, run by George. And George is an absolutely awesome guy. He couldn't make it tonight, but I highly recommend going over there and playing in Durham, North Carolina with those guys because it was such an inviting atmosphere. I feel like it was a really good kind of starting point for Kill Team. That whole group was just so awesome. They went to dinner with us afterwards. They, in between games, they talked to you, kind of teach you things. Every one of my opponents was very, very, very was forgiving, I guess, because they'd sit there and be like, oh, no, you actually can't do that. Here's the actual rule. So I thought that it was a great learning event. The group was just so awesome. So very cool. I kind of got the feeling that all of Kill Team's kind of like that. So what are your thoughts on just starting the game, Travis?
I think personally, I've been a big proponent of just coming out and playing your first tournament like as soon as possible. That said, I do run one of the softer entry points, I think. Like, it is a very competitive environment, but if you just come with like 6 Space Marines, you play 3 games in a row, it's going to be infinitely better than you playing 1 game a week with your friend in your house, which is what a lot of people do. Like, they just don't see other people play. They don't see what they're missing. And until you really see someone doing all of the nitty-gritty measurement or telling you like, you are obscured when you're shooting from the top of a building down off the building, like, you're just not going to know a lot of the times because it's very easy to miss something in a GW rule situation because they will talk about something one time at one part of the book and there will be implications that are 3 pages down and they will never refer to it again.
I really felt that. Like, Kill Team's awesome. I'm just going to put that out there. It's super fun. The entry point is very, very accessible to anyone. But once you start getting into the nitty-gritty of the competitive environment, like, there are so many, like, line of sight things you got to kind of really sit down and think about. And just the obscuring rules kind of it's a tough one because when you start actually being like, all right, can I auspex that or can I not? You go, well, are they obscured? Are they in the obscured rule or are they obscured using the cover rule? And so you got to kind of think about there's multiple ways you can be obscured, which is kind of interesting, but it's also makes for kind of a mind twist if you're learning the game.
And there's also like the downside of GW using the same word over and over and over to mean different things. Like when the game first came out, cover is a word that's very important because you can be in cover. But there's also a special rule that's called no cover that stops you from retaining cover. And all of these concepts are kind of mixed together in the same bucket, but they're not functioning together. Like they don't overlap. So there's definitely a big learning curve. So just going to a tournament where a TO has been playing for a while, that helps a lot.
I cannot emphasize that enough. I played probably 4 games before I went in with someone who also didn't know the game, and it was good to get models on the table, but I don't think I learned a drop of the game until I played my first game in the environment. And when you go in that situation, I think it's really important to be like, I don't know much, so when you tell me something, I'm going to listen and kind of, adapt my game, because you can't have the mindset like I'm here to win per se. I mean, maybe again, there's a balance.
Yeah, there's a balance. Also, I think right now, because the game is so new and we're only like one edition deep, basically, there's a lot of people still learning the game. So the environment, I think, is explicitly much friendlier than something like 40K, where the player base has had their army for a long time. Certain parts of the game kind of feel a certain way. So like those things are a little bit more entrenched. Whereas 40K's, like Kill Team is just is newer. So the player base is newer and a little bit softer, I think, not in terms of like competitiveness, but in terms of just how much they're willing to like walk you through why things are happening in the game.
Right. I agree. Yeah, I think that was a big thing. And George was the TO actually at that event. And if I had a question, I'd be like, you mind if I just ask him? Because and he was just very cordial with it. And my opponents were all super gracious and like, oh yeah, because I wanted to learn. So I think that was a really cool thing. And I think it was a 6-game event, and I had 6 awesome opponents. So you can't really ask for that. I mean, there's not many games that when you show up at an event and you just have great games across the board. So really happy about that. I'll tell you what I played. So I went in wanting to paint an army up and paint something cool. So I just picked 6 intercessors sort of at random. Like at first I kind of had something in mind, but then I was like, let's just paint the cooler models, because I had like 10 in the database and I painted 6 of them. So I ended up painting the 6 I liked the most. I ran like 4 combat dudes and 2 shooty guys with scopes. So my take home on that is it's probably important to have a mix of at least like 8 to 10 dudes in that grouping, because there's definitely times you want to take more shooting and definitely times you want to take more combat. So the grenade guy, he felt phenomenal having crack and frag. Like, oh man, he was just he was an MVP for me because he had that ability and he was also a monster in combat. The scope guy, the gunner, man, absolutely phenomenal. He shoots grenades too, which is feels crazy. And then he had the +1 damage thing, and he had the thing where he was auto wounding on 5s to hit, which in that game is just real good. So that the shooting guys felt good. The combat, being new to the game, combat's a little funky in Kill Team. So you basically, when you go in, you both just swing. So you gotta be cognizant of the fact your guys can die pretty easy with that, even if you're a Marine, which is funky because you're swinging and you just get an open swing on people. So they don't get a defense roll, nothing. So you gotta figure out like, when do I parry? When do I not parry? When do I go full on damage? Because if you don't do it right, you're going to get like your 13, 14 wound Marines just murdered by something stupid. And that happened to me a lot. I'm going to say it. Like I definitely learned my lessons early on. Like combat is not really forgiving if you don't get the order correct.
It's interesting that that's your early experience, because I think many players, as they play longer and longer, melee ends up being the more consistent step as far as games go, because what melee allows you to do is guarantee that you're going to get chunks of damage in, whereas when you go into shooting, you might get 4 hits, but your opponent, even if they're saving on 5s, they can still roll out of it. That was the thing that I bumped into in Vegas. Like I played against Jimmy's Felgor, I shot a lot of bullets, but he just naturally saved out on 5s for like a turn, and I was like, well, if I shoot 4 dudes and all 4 of them are survive and taking only 4 damage, like I'm probably going to lose this game. So shooting armies, while they are good, can just get dice rolled out of the game, which is something you can't really control, because while there are a fair amount of AP2 guns, and AP2 shooting is very lethal, once those guns go away, or if you can't set stuff up and your opponent gets to melee, your shooting operatives almost always just instantly die. Yeah. So, that is definitely something that happens. When it comes to melee, what you're really looking for, for a more experienced player to a newer player, is you don't have to kill the person in melee. You can just survive and then stay there, and then next turn you can kill the guy and then run off, because now that person that's been in melee is a safe staging point for the next turn. So what you're effectively doing is setting up the next danger bubble.
Because you could even, and this is something I thought about like round 5 or 6 in the tournament, you could go in and you could just hit somebody and like be like, I'm charging you, and then you don't fight.
Correct. Yes,
Which
you
is
can
huge.
absolutely, shoot someone to weaken them, charge them, press a button on them because you have 3 APL against 2 APL. So unlike 40K in Kill Team, you take actions to score your objectives. So since you can take actions in any order because there's no phasing, you can shoot someone, charge them, then press a button, or you could charge, fight, kill someone else because you charged and fought into 2 people, kill a dude. Now you have 3 APL versus 2 APL for guardsmen. Take a point from them, and then your opponent's just like, well, now I have to somehow clear this dude, get this guy off this point, and now your Space Marine is rip, rare, and ready to go. So it can be a lot, and there's a lot of layers to Kill Team, which I think is why so many of us enjoy it. And you do feel a lot cooler when you're doing something cool in Kill Team compared to 40K, I think. Well, at least on an individual model level, maybe not in an army scale, with dreadnoughts firing off huge bolts behind you.
It feels more cinematic. We were talking about that. Me and my 2 friends who went with me, we were all new to the game and just showed up and played. And we were all talking about how it felt very cinematic. It feels reminiscent of like the Lord of the Rings or like one of those games where each dice roll, you almost feel the character doing what they're doing, which is really neat. Like getting on a vantage point and sniping down on someone, or like, the rule set feels like appropriate for the models, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, just having Marines be cooler than other dudes because they take 3 actions does make you feel like a superhuman. And if there's ever a time when your Space Marines are outnumbering your opponent, you feel like a Giga Chad, which is, not something that you really get, I think, in the Army game, right? Because you're like, it's
Marines
hard.
are pretty weak. Marines are fairly weak in 40K, honestly. Like, they're fine, but they're not like, they're not as strong as they should be, like, as far as because it just break the game.
It's just hard to like scale the game where the Space Marines suddenly are the heroes in game that they are in the books. Whereas like in Kill Team, if you can get to the point where you've killed the plasma gun and the melta-gun and it's 4v like 8, it really is like you're trapped in here with me instead of the other way. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I played versus what are they called? The Carsicans, my last round.
Corsican.
And once you got like, I got a couple of matchups that were 1-on-1 with them, Marine versus them, and that felt like Murder Town. Like it was like, oh yeah, this is a superhuman versus human. Like, and that's pretty neat.
It does feel that way. Yeah, you just feel like a Chad. And when you've got 3 APL, you can walk over to a dude standing on a point who took a point last turn. You're just like, this is mine, and then I'll kill you afterwards, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just leave you here so that you can run away.
So I actually have George here. I'm going to jump him in real fast. He's we got George jumping on here. He's
no.
What's up, dude? How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Apparently, my camera is using my index headset, not my camera.
This is a VR headset. I don't know what you've been doing, George.
Oh man. So we got George on. We got George's Travis. I'm sure y'all know each other through the game, but we're mid episode here. We've been talking you up and talking about the Triangle Open a little bit to start us off, and now we're kind of jumping into kind of first hot takes on my first experience with the Kill Team tournament. So
hell yeah, I can't wait to disappoint.
He said that melee is actually not as reliable as shooting.
I didn't say reliable. No.
All right. Okay.
No. Well, let's backtrack. And what I said was, as a new player, I feel like there's a lot of room for error there.
Yes, that is true.
So I made a lot of errors the first couple of games going into combat, just getting my guys Murder Town by stuff that they shouldn't have. And I think this parrying, knowing when to parry, is a huge deal. And yeah.
Fight math is one of the harder things to get right because there's a lot of there's few operatives with rerolls and parry first and stuff where if you especially with brutal or just a number of crits, you need to know when to parry, when to attack, what can be parried, and it can get very complicated very quickly. But the more you practice it, it's much faster than shooting.
Yeah, I could see that absolutely, and I love combat. Don't get me wrong, melee is probably my favorite way to play any game. So Commandos felt pretty good at that, but I refuse to play orcs, so that's where we're at.
Luckily, Commandos are good at everything still.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, just jump. What are y'all's hot takes right now? I know we kind of talked a little bit of my first experience, but I want to know from y'all who have been playing this game for a while, who do you think are the top 3 armies right now going into like Adepticon and like kind of the summer season?
I think it depends on what terrain is going to be played at the GW Opens and gets standardized. If Beta Decima does end up being some percentage of the metagame, it will shift things. And I would assume if Beta Decima is played in any large numbers, Commandos are still going to remain like very, very high up there because they are miserable on Beta
Easily.
Decima.
What's
Even
Beta
more so
Decima?
than they are in Open. The new gantry terrain with the, where
It's
you got to
very open. The only thing protecting you is obscuring most of the time. There's basically no cover to be had. So
What set is
There's
that
some
from?
cover on objectives. It's basically the new terrain type where you're running around on a bunch of floating platforms. It is cool looking, but it maybe doesn't play the best. And if it does get played at the GW Opens, I would expect that Commandos, unless they eat some humongous nerf that really radically shapes, like rechanges how the team functions, that they would still be up there.
Yep.
However,
Is from.
if they go back down to 10 operatives, maybe they're less of a problem, generically, but it doesn't seem like that's what they want to do.
Yeah, Beta Decima is from the newest set, Salvation, which was split between the teams and the terrain.
Oh, you don't get the terrain in the box.
Not in this new one.
Yeah,
They
you
work
get,
right it.
parts of the terrain.
Yeah.
Definitely, I know everyone complained about getting too much of the terrain, but somehow we ended up with a worse way to get the terrain than what we had before, because now nobody will have the terrain, which, maybe people just would rather not play on it, which I guess is a plus.
Yeah, I haven't played on it personally, but since I tend to play melee teams, I'm not super thrilled about jumping onto that terrain. As any Pathfinders will wreck face there, incursors are just gonna mop people up. Commandos are gonna mop people up because they can shoot, they can melee, they can stay on conceal the entire time, and they've got climbing equipment, which just sort of breaks Beta Decima in ways that it's impossible to break other terrain types. So
I expect that if they keep the terrain as in the dark and open, we'll probably see Commandos around the top. Vet Guard, I assume, will still remain just as good as they've always been. Then after that, I don't really have any crazy horse in the race.
Yeah, I think generically speaking, Commandos, Vet Guard.
Actually, I think Chaos Cults are probably still pretty good. In the dark, they still get the very polarizing matchups, and then on generic open, maybe they're not as good. But Felgor,
They're still acceptable.
Chaos Cults, the melee crazy melee powerful super hordes, that probably still feels like a very good archetype if we stay on just open and in the dark, and especially if we stay on every objective has heavy terrain on it, which has been a thing that has happened, I think, at some tournaments. Australia did just have novitiates take a big 6-round tournament, grabbing a golden ticket. So maybe,
Yeah.
they were still doing good. And if people don't remember how to play against them, they are crazy good.
Dude, novitiates are a phenomenal team. They're very strong. Boy, are they stressful to play. Oh my god!
Really bad against Commandos. So
I mean,
as long as Commandos are where they are in the meta, novitiates should theoretically be worse.
Yeah.
Do you think that I've seen a lot of hype on Casterkin since the last update? Do y'all still, because I know they're elite killers, so but you're not seeing a lot of elite armies. You're seeing a lot of the horde stuff kind of doing well.
I believe me and Travis have both landed on the same place of Kazakin. Nothing about them has changed.
Yeah, I still think they're super, super powerful, but people still have to play them in kind of a very specific way against the melee teams, and Chaos Cults still give them issues. Yeah. But they're still really strong, and you kind of just don't roll dice with them, or you do, but the dice don't matter. Your opponent just dies. So if you can set it up, it's good. They didn't do great at LVO, so I think that is coloring my perception a little bit. Obviously, I haven't played them, and I don't think they did that well at my most recent monthly. So it might be that piloting them is much harder than it looks, but they should be good on Beta Decima, and they didn't do that well.
They occupy a weird niche of a shooting team that doesn't really have a whole lot of powerful shooting. They've got a bunch of gunners, but the way, since they only have 10 operatives instead of Vet Guard's 14 or Pathfinder's 12, they sort of can get out activated before they can use their biggest guns. And elite points make it so you don't have to roll dice, but if you roll very poorly for 2 turns, you still get diced. Ask me how I know. I took them to the UTC tournament that Travis ran in or middle of January. And man, I went through, on average, 10 to 12 elite points on turn 2 every game.
Yeah.
Which is buck wild.
I tell you that it's funny that you mentioned the out activation thing because I played versus Casterkins at your event, and the big thing I noticed, this is my 6th game, so I was a little bit more experienced at this point, but I'd rushed one of my guys to the corner because I knew that he had all his guys hidden back there, and before he even activated his plasma gun, it was dead. And it was because he had to get stuff positioned before he could get them out, and I just was able to do like 2 activations kill.
Yeah. They're very susceptible to being rushed down, because they're just terrible in melee, and they are susceptible to getting out activated. I played a Leander at the UTC. He was playing Vetguard. I was playing Kazarkin, and I just couldn't do anything in the matchup. Like, I took the better side. I denied him easy sniper lanes, and I just couldn't get anywhere because he always had the last activation. So if I tried to do something, I would just lose my team. It's so rough.
Yeah.
Where do y'all see
calculated risks when you're playing the out activation teams, or you have to force your opponent to make a mistake on like, I'm gonna have a dude stand in the open and I'm gonna make you want to shoot me with something that you have to get out of position for, and you basically have to force them to do something so that you can springboard into a charge fight shoot or a charge fight or a charge pass, basically, to set up for the next turn. Because you just have to find a way to leverage your best operatives on a turn later down the line instead of playing that straight up turn. Like any of those mid-board objectives, charge, pass, and wait.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Did you, for those who don't know, myself included, how often do you see an update in this game? Is it every quarter?
It's about every quarter, yeah. About
ideally,
every 3 months has been pretty consistent enough where I can say that it is consistent.
How big of shifts do you see? Like, whenever you see one of these new updates come out, how much does it shift in the meta whenever they put one out?
I think every time they update, it shifts the meta a little bit. This one is probably the least shifting it's done. And even that was a reasonably large shift. Yeah.
Like, Kazakin feels like a bigger effect on paper than it was in game. Same thing with the Chaos Cult nerf. The Torments maybe not healing up to full feels like a bigger nerf on paper than it actually was.
I mean, their big nerf is that your small guys have to kill someone. That's actually their real nerf.
Yeah,
and that does hurt them a lot, especially because that was how they were winning matchups like Commandos, where Commandos say they're good on paper, but every once in a while, with 4 dice, you will just hit 2 dice, and then
you just miss.
A guy mutates, and you're like, oh, I'm screwed. Yeah. Now the model has ceaseless 3/4 rending, and it's already hit you once for 2, and now it hits you again with ceaseless, and it might just kill you. So that was actually like a big nerf to them.
Yeah.
The Torment one doesn't matter nearly as much as the other stuff.
It didn't really matter. I guess I didn't really feel the cultist, the devotee nerf too much. This is the way that I play Chaos Cults is more of don't mutate unnecessarily. So I won't throw my devotees at things, even if I have a reasonable chance to mutate, simply because I don't necessarily want to lose out on my mission actions, unless I need to gain an activation somewhere or I need to gain a little bit of melee threat. But yeah, so that I don't think I would personally feel that nerf too much. I'd feel it, but it is a powerful nerf for, I think, maybe not the super tippy top tables.
I mean, from the World Championship experience, from watching those players, they do get a lot of leverage out of my devotee is going into charge, and if you fight me, sometimes you lose, and I turn into me.
That's true. Yeah.
So that is a big
true.
deal.
Yeah.
The change of I'm going to use my activations to stall you out, and every once in a while I get a bonus activation out of it. That was a big part of how they beat the Commando matchup, which originally, going into the World Championship, was a matchup that many American players thought was an impossible matchup, I think. Conceptually, they're like, how do you beat Commandos? There's 3 models starting in your face. All of your dudes die in one shot, and you can't protect your leader. That was what everyone thought. But when you go to the World Championship level, players are creating blocks of devotees behind a wall, so you literally can't charge. There's no one visible, so you can't get a grenade off, and that was a big part of that game. So there's a lot of stuff that gets played at higher levels that, sure, you might be able to avoid some stuff, but at some point you got to make your opponent make a mistake, and that devotee nerf is a big one. I don't think Chaos Cults had a ton of players who love them, so it's not like they've seen a ton of play since the nerf. But Felgor have now popped up as that is the melee menace team that everyone is
man.
oh,
I can't believe I can't believe they got a buff. Like, I played Felgor after the nerf exclusively, after their initial one, and I thought they were perfectly fine. But I was not a player who charged past ever. So I didn't charge past, stand on points, and like whatever, I'm alive or dead, doesn't matter. If I was charging, I was doing damage and taking models away. So my gameplay never changed. So for me, the nerf only enhanced the way that the team should have been played from the beginning. And like now that you can stand and gain 1 APL, like that's actually really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge change that made a humongous difference to them.
Yeah, I don't think they needed that buff.
So the audience, I think, that's listening is going to be people who are 40K players who, aren't really in Kill Team. Maybe they just kind of delved in. Give me 3 teams that y'all think are user friendly. I'm going to go ahead and say Intercessors are definitely one of those.
I would go just as far as say as like something like Strike Force Justian, something that's very stylistically cool. And for any Space Marine player who's listening, you get to use an Eliminator, you get to use a Captain, you get to use a Lieutenant, and you get to use like 3 random dudes, including a Heavy Intercessor. Cool. Like that would be like, I've got a pile of Space Marine models. Let's just play this team. And the other good thing about it is you really don't have to think about that much. Everything's printed on a card, and they are cool. You've got a Captain with a 4-up invuln with 15 wounds, which is just tanky as hell. And you get 4 extra CP. So you get to like every single person shoots on death, or every single person gets all this extra stuff to do. So I just played them this weekend. I think they are stylistically very cool. They might not be as good as some of the other teams, but if you're coming over from Space Marines or Chaos Space Marines, it is a great starting team. Legionary, right up in there. And then Kasrkin, if you're any Imperial Guard players, have a box of Kasrkin. They are a team that I've said on my podcast, Just Another Kill Team podcast, rewards you for every layer of learning how to play Kill Team. Like step 1, I learned how to shoot. Step 2, you've got some melee operative. Step 3, I'm now thinking about where I position my operatives for the future turns. Like all of that stuff is rewarded, which is, I think, an excellent team. So, Imperial teams, big surprise.
Yeah, I think I agree with basically all of that. Any elite team you choose besides Phobos is they're not necessarily dead simple, but they're simple and forgiving enough to learn the game and do well. Kasrkin are simple enough to learn the game, and the more you learn, the better at the game you will see yourself be better at the game because you'll do better. And then like Kroot is a very simple team. They have really much one objective, which is score points, and the problem is they can't really kill a lot of things. They're painfully average in just about everything. They're just really good at scoring points.
What do you think chaos wise? Give me just like 1 or 2 chaos. You said legionaries. Is that a pretty good starting point for a lot of people who they want to play a chaos faction?
Yeah, legionary I think are a really good starting faction because you pick up 6 chaos space marines and you say these are all Nurgle, which increases your survivability. You take less damage. You get free crits on defense. It's hard to shift you. And then that is a really good way to learn the game because you get your melee specialists, you get your gunners, you can do shooting, you can do melee, you can do interactions with a couple of objective stuff. So it gives you the ability to interact with all facets of the game. And then once you get comfortable playing the game, you can then branch out into the other 4 Chaos Gods or even the Undivided mark. And then, Khorne lets you double charge dudes in melee and strike with a free crit, which can be really powerful. Slaanesh gives you extra movement, which is incredibly powerful when you want to position so you can threaten charges or threaten move, shoot, dashes. And then Tzeentch is just more shooty stuff. So it makes your shooting more consistent, not reliable, but it makes it more consistent. And it gives you a little bit of survivability against the teams that shoot you the hardest because you get an invul save. So the non-Nurgle marks, and Undivided gives you rerolls within melee and pistol range. So it's like the least flashy, but generally you want to be in pistol and melee range. So like having a free reroll isn't bad. It makes you really reliable because there's almost no rerolls on the team, which is the hardest part about playing Legionary, is sometimes the dice just be dice and you're going to stuck with the result. So once you play Legionary and you play Nurgle and you understand how the team works, and you can then flavor it and go, I'm going to play some Nurgle and Khorne. So I'm going to get a few extra charges and do a lot of melee with these guys. Or I'll play Nurgle and Slaanesh or Tzeentch and Slaanesh. And then you can really take what you learn from the game and tailor your 6 Space Marines to be really hyper focused on doing that job really well.
Cool.
And I think it's a really fun team.
What about Felgors? They pretty friendly?
I would probably not suggest that you start on Felgor or any of like the melee or like pure shooting teams.
Is it for the exact reason what I said, where people get melee and don't realize how to do the math on it?
No, actually,
it's a much more stressful game to learn how to start playing, because you basically spend all of your teaching moments staying on conceal and getting shot.
Yeah,
it really shouldn't be on engage ever. Like for the first turn, everyone's on conceal except for the one guy who has a grenade, and you just are spending all of your time like, how do I best stand and not get shot? Because the entire goal for all the melee teams, Gellerpox, Chaos Cults, Felgor, who else is a pure melee team? Basically, the pure goal is like, I'm just going to stand in cover, heavy cover specifically, get close to you so I can charge you the next turn and not get shot. Because if anyone gets shot on turn 1 and I lose 2 dudes, game's over.
Game's over, yeah.
It's just not a good way to like learn how to play the game, because you're going to miss out on seeing how shooting works. You're going to miss out on learning when cover is useful. You're going to miss out on, a bunch of stuff that I don't think is good to miss out on. Because
learning how shooting works is super important to a melee team, because you need to know when Vantage is applicable, what are the Vantage sight lines, when obscuring is applicable, how to use obscuring to your advantage as a melee operative. The trick to not being shot is to know where you can't be shot, and you can't know where you can't be shot unless you know how shooting works. And if you play a pure melee team, it's going to make that much harder, and you need to be really, really strong on your positional game. Like you need to place models, with near millimeter precision, so you can use how line of sight works to just not get shot. And so it is a much harder game to play than, say, like Hunter Clade or Blooded, which can do shooting and melee. That gives you the ability to threaten at all ranges, where pure melee teams, if they get shot, they're sort of done. So if that happens too early, you just spend 4 turns going, well, I guess I'll try and eke out as close a loss as possible. Which, you never want to be in that position.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up with just a couple things. George, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing down there and kind of what your club's doing and anything coming up?
Yeah. So we just wrapped up with the Triangle Open January 20th, 21st. And we had a really fun time. Blake, I appreciate you showing up and having it be your first big kill team experience.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. We've got a really good group here in the Triangle area in North Carolina. I run quarterly tournaments every 3 months. There's also quarterly leagues, 10-week leagues that we run. That's run by my another guy down there. And so we just, every Tuesday we get down Atomic Empire and we just sit down, we play kill team. I think we've got more kill team players than 40K players at this point.
Wow.
So that's it's such an interesting game when you try to compare them, because it's hard to actually compare them as games. They're just sort of different. They just use the same models.
They use some of the same numbers, but none of the numbers mean the same thing. Like your armor save is technically a 3-up save, but it feels very different than 40K's 3-up save. Having a 3-up ballistic skill or a 3-up weapon skill means something very different. You're like, oh yeah, this guy with 4 attacks is definitely going to kill something. Like, no, 4 attacks almost basically never kills anything with 3 attacks. So
yeah, it is a more interesting game. And so we just sort of keep momentum going. We play every Tuesday. We've got leagues always going with 1 or 2 weeks of downtime. We've got tournaments every quarter. We've got tournaments out in Asheville, which is just to the west. We've got a tournament coming up a little bit east of the Triangle. So like North Carolina is really popping off. There's a whole bunch of different scenes showing up. And so I've been going around to different places and trying to get everyone in the same chat. I've got like 4 different TOs for the different regions of North Carolina in one chat where we talk about putting on events and stuff. So I'm just trying to grow Kill Team.
Yeah, man, I think you did a great job with that event, and I would recommend anyone to come out to the Atomic Empire store. Also, just unreal, like one of the coolest stores I've ever been to. It's huge and
So much space.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I recommend going out there for sure.
Appreciate it.
And I'll definitely be back. Are you going to do Adepticon?
I didn't know that tickets were on sale until they were sold out.
Well,
So no.
From what I understand about Adepticon, everyone was like, "Oh, tickets." I was like, "No, those tickets have been gone for months."
I actually got one. I'm playing in it, so I don't know how that happened. I got on like 30 minutes later after they opened. I was like, "Oh, there's one available."
Yeah, but it's also the website is hard to navigate for anyone who hasn't gone to Adepticon before. So it's kind of like Nova, where you have to buy like layers of tickets, and there's like different check-ins and checkouts, and
no, it's brutal.
Terrible. It's good. LVO this year, you could buy your ticket, and it would you could buy a ticket package that had everything, and that was, sensible.
Yeah,
Travis, we'll pitch yours one more time too here. The New York Open over in Brooklyn. Yeah. When is that again? It's going to be.
I think the goal this year is the end of October. We'll be running it at a different venue, which should be larger, and we can take on more game systems, but it'll be the same core group running Kill Team. And I think this year we're going to have the corpse of a dead god for our narrative.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, I went to New York Open too, and that was a great time. I had a great time.
It looks like a blast.
It's less room than other places, but New York is what it is.
New York City. New York is my home city. I understand what New York City is about.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. Hopefully, I'll see you guys at some of the events we're doing this year. So we'll have to get together again and discuss down the road. See where I've landed. See if I've gone from noob to adequate player.
Yeah, and you know what? Always message us. We're happy to share our experience. I've got a YouTube channel, Straum Plays Kill Team, where I've got 4 videos now up. I just put one out 2 days ago. Wait, today's Tuesday? Yesterday.
Monday.
Yeah. So I have a couple more videos that I just need to get a little bit of video for, and those should be going up hopefully in the next month. But man, when you work 50 hours a week, it's hard to do YouTube too.
Yeah, you lose sight of time for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We'll be talking to you shortly. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you.
Like what you just listened to? Check out Art of War and the Art of War Down Under podcasts on the competitive 40K network, theartofwar40k.com.